grand ballroom in Vienna glittered with crystal chandeliers, the sound of a string orchestra filling the opulent space with elegant music. Three large men entered, blocking the path of a waiter carrying a tray, their movements aggressive and deliberate. They shoved him, mocked him, their hands reaching for a small wooden box he'd hidden inside his jacket. The man, a single father, his face gaunt from poverty and struggle, suddenly clenched his fists and stood his ground, blocking their way. Chairs scraped as conversation stopped, every guest turning to watch. At the head table, the powerful CEO slowly rose to his feet, and the entire crowded ballroom froze in absolute silence. Lukas Hoffman was 36 years old and had learned that dignity was the only wealth that couldn't be taken from you, though many tried. He worked as a waiter, taking whatever jobs paid enough to keep his 7-year-old daughter Emma fed, clothed, and safe. He was a widower. His wife Anna had died 3 years ago from cancer, leaving him with memories, grief, and a daughter who asked every night when Mama was coming home. For the first year, Lukas had barely functioned, moving through days like a ghost. Then Emma's questions had shifted from, "Where's Mama?" to, "Why are you so sad, Papa?" And Lukas had realized he needed to be present for the child who still needed him. His dreams had been small once. He'd studied at the Vienna Music Academy, showed promise as a violinist, dreamed of concert halls and standing ovations. But Anna's illness had consumed their savings, and after she died, those dreams seemed impossibly distant. Now his only dream was ensuring Emma could pursue her own love of music, could have the opportunities poverty had stolen from him. Tonight, Lukas had taken a high-paying job serving at a gala for one of Vienna's largest corporations. The pay was triple his normal rate, enough to cover 2 months of Emma's music lessons. He'd brought with him the one precious thing he still owned, a small wooden box containing his late wife's violin. The instrument she'd played before illness had weakened her hands. He'd planned to use his break to replace a broken string. The ballroom was magnificent, filled with Vienna's elite, business people in designer suits, politicians, journalists, all radiating wealth and power. Lukas moved among them invisibly, just another servant to be ignored or dismissed. At the head table sat Adrian Keller, CEO of a multinational conglomerate, known throughout Europe as the Man of Steel, cold, calculating, brilliant, and utterly without mercy in business. His face appeared regularly in financial magazines, always with the same stern, unapproachable expression. What those magazines didn't mention was that Adrian had grown up in poverty, had worked as a waiter himself through university, had clawed his way up from nothing to everything. He'd built walls around that past, bearing it under success and power. The trouble began when 3 men, corporate security turned arrogant guests, known for their cruelty to staff, decided Lukas would be their evening's entertainment. They'd been drinking heavily, emboldened by the power they wielded over people they considered beneath them. "Hey, waiter," one called out as Lukas passed. "What's that you're hiding in your jacket?" "Stealing from your betters?" Lukas kept his head down, tried to move past, but they blocked his path. Hands grabbed at his jacket, trying to reach the wooden box he'd carefully tucked inside. "Please," Lukas said quietly. "It's nothing valuable. Just leave it alone." "Nothing valuable?" Another man laughed. "Then you won't mind sharing it." They reached for the box again, and something inside Lukas, something that had been building through years of humiliation, of being invisible, of swallowing his pride to survive, finally broke. He set down his tray carefully, stood up straight, and looked them directly in the eyes. "No one touches this," he said, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. "This belonged to my wife. It's all my daughter has left of her mother. You can mock me, you can push me, but you will not touch this." The ballroom began to quiet, sensing confrontation. Lukas thought, "I've been silent for so many years, but tonight, in front of all these people, I will not back down." The 3 men laughed at Lukas's defiance, clearly not expecting resistance from someone they viewed as powerless. The largest of them reached out again, shoving Lukas hard enough to make him stumble. "A waiter giving orders," he sneered. "You need to remember your place." Before things could escalate further, a sharp voice cut through the tension. "What exactly is happening here?" Adrian Keller had left his seat at the head table and was approaching, his presence commanding immediate attention. The three men straightened slightly, suddenly aware they were under scrutiny. "Just dealing with a problem, mister," Keller, one explained. This waiter was being difficult. "Step aside," Adrian commanded, his tone leaving no room for argument. The men moved reluctantly, and Adrian turned his attention to Lukas. "You, come with me." Lukas followed Adrian into a quiet hallway outside the ballroom, his heart pounding, certain he was about to be fired or worse. But when they were alone, Adrian's stern expression shifted slightly. "What's in the box?" he asked, his voice less harsh than before. Lukas hesitated, then pulled out the wooden case and opened it to reveal an old but well-maintained violin. "It was my wife's. She died 3 years ago. I bring it with me sometimes to feel like she's still close. My daughter Emma asked to see it, to touch the strings her mother played." Adrian stared at the instrument for a long moment. "You play?" "I used to study at the music academy," Lukas admitted quietly, "before Anna got sick, before everything changed. Now I just work whatever jobs I can find to keep my daughter fed and give her the lessons I can no longer afford for myself." Something in Adrian's expression shifted, a crack in the armor he'd maintained for years. "I was a waiter once," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. 20 years ago, working my way through business school. I remember men like those three. I remember being shoved, mocked, treated like I was less than human because I served food instead of eating it." Lukas looked up, surprised to find understanding instead of judgment in the CEO's eyes. "I built my company by remembering that anger," Adrian continued, "by channeling every humiliation into fuel for success. But somewhere along the way, I forgot why I was angry in the first place. I forgot what it felt like to be invisible." "I'm not invisible to my daughter," Lukas said firmly. "That's all that matters." Adrian smiled slightly, a rare expression that transformed his face. "You stood up to 3 men who could have seriously hurt you. You did that to protect a box, not for pride, not for revenge, but for your child's connection to her mother." He placed his hand on the wooden case gently. "You're braver than half the men in that ballroom wearing €1,000 suits." "I just couldn't let them take it," Lukas replied. "Emma asks about her mother every night. This violin is proof that Anna existed, that she mattered, that she was more than just a memory fading with time." Adrian was quiet for a moment, clearly moved by something he couldn't quite express. Then he straightened, his CEO persona returning. "Go back in there. Finish your shift, but keep your head up. You have nothing to be ashamed of." "They'll just try again," Lukas said. "No," Adrian replied with certainty. "They won't." When Lukas returned home that night, exhausted but with the violin safe, Emma ran to greet him at the door of their tiny apartment. "Papa, you're home!" She hugged him tightly, then noticed the violin case. "Did you bring Mama's violin?" Lukas knelt down, opening the case so Emma could see the instrument gleaming in the lamplight. "Yes, sweetheart, and I want you to know something. Your Mama's still here, in the music she loved, in the things she taught us about courage and love." Emma reached out to gently touch the strings, and Lukas watched tears form in her eyes. "I miss her so much, Papa." "I know, Liebchen, I know, but she's proud of you, and she's proud that her violin is safe, waiting for the day you're ready to play it." "Really? You think I could play Mama's violin?" "I know you can," Lukas said, pulling her close. "And when you do, it will be like she's playing again too." That night, after Emma fell asleep clutching her stuffed rabbit, Lukas sat by the window looking out at Vienna's lights. The encounter at the gala had shaken something loose in him. Not just anger at injustice, but a reminder that standing up for what mattered was worth any risk. He thought about Adrian Keller, this powerful CEO who had revealed a glimpse of his own past, who had recognized in Lukas something of his younger self. There had been an unexpected connection there, a moment of shared understanding between 2 men from completely different worlds. Lukas didn't know it yet, but that night had set in motion changes that would transform not just his life, but Emma's future, and even the cold, isolated world Adrian had built around himself. Sometimes courage isn't about winning. Sometimes it's just about refusing to let go of what matters most, even when the whole world is watching and waiting for you to fall. 2 days later, Adrian hosted another corporate event, and Lukas had been specifically requested to work it, a detail he found both puzzling and concerning. The same elite crowd gathered, the same crystal and champagne, the same performative conversations about money and power. The three men who had harassed Lukas were there too, and they made their intentions clear immediately. As Lukas carried a tray of wine glasses across the ballroom, one of them deliberately stepped into his path, causing him to stumble. "Still here?" the man taunted loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "I'm surprised they let you back after your behavior the other night." Lukas steadied himself, said nothing, and tried to move around them. But they weren't finished. They followed him, their voices growing louder, drawing attention. "What kind of man brings his dead wife's violin to work?" another mocked. "Probably trying to sell it. Or maybe it's all fake, just a sob story to get sympathy." The ballroom was quieting now, guests turning to watch what they assumed would be entertaining drama. Some pulled out phones, ready to capture whatever happened next. Lukas felt the familiar heat of humiliation, the urge to shrink and disappear. But then he remembered Emma's face when she touched the violin strings, remembered his promise that her mother's courage lived on through them. He set down his tray carefully and turned to face his tormentors. "You can insult me," he said, his voice carrying across the increasingly silent room. "You can push me. You can try to make me feel small. But what you cannot do is make me ashamed of loving my wife, of honoring her memory, or of fighting for my daughter's future." "Fighting?" The largest man laughed. "You're a waiter who couldn't afford his wife's medical bills. You're nothing." He shoved Lukas hard, and when Lukas stumbled back, another man kicked his feet out from under him. Lukas fell hard on the marble floor, and guests gasped, some in shock, many in that particular excitement that comes from watching someone else's humiliation. The three men stood over him, clearly preparing to continue, when the sound of a glass being set down rang out like a bell in the quiet room. Adrian Keller stood at the head table, his eyes locked on the scene before him. He walked slowly, deliberately toward the center of the ballroom, each step echoing in the silence. The crowd parted instinctively. "Enough," he said, and that single word carried more authority than any shout could have. He reached Lukas and extended his hand, helping him to his feet with surprising gentleness. Then he carefully brushed dust from Lukas's jacket, a gesture of respect that left the room stunned. Adrian turned to face the gathered elite, his expression cold with controlled fury. "This man," he said, his voice filling every corner of the ballroom, "has more honor in his smallest finger than most of you possess in your entire beings." The three harassers tried to speak, but Adrian silenced them with a look. Lukas Hoffman once studied at the Vienna Music Academy. He gave up his dreams to care for his dying wife, then worked 3 jobs to support his daughter after losing her. He stands before you not in shame, but in strength. And anyone who cannot see that is blind in ways wealth can never cure. Adrian turned to address the entire room. "I built this company from nothing. I clawed my way up from poverty and remembered every slight, every humiliation, every moment of being treated as less than human. I became successful so I would never be vulnerable again." His voice grew stronger. But watching this man defend his wife's memory, watching him stand when others would have crumbled, I remember what real strength looks like. It's not in bank accounts or board positions. It's in protecting what matters, even when the whole world is laughing. The ballroom was absolutely silent now, every phone lowered, every mocking smile gone. Adrian made a decision that would shock everyone. "Effective immediately, I'm establishing a community music program through our foundation. Lukas Hoffman will manage it. His daughter will receive a full scholarship to the finest music school in Vienna. And anyone who has a problem with this decision can leave now." He looked directly at the 3 men who had tormented Lukas. "As for you 3, you're no longer welcome at any event I host. In fact, you're no longer welcome in any business dealing with my company. Touch this man again, and you're touching me." The 3 men's faces went pale. Being blacklisted by Adrian Keller meant professional death in Vienna's business circles. They tried to protest, but Adrian simply turned his back on them. He looked at Lukas, who stood dazed by what had just transpired. "You don't have to thank me. You earned this by being the man you are, by refusing to let cruelty make you cruel, by remembering that some things matter more than survival." Lukas felt tears in his eyes but didn't try to hide them. I don't know what to say. Say you'll help me build something that matters, Adrian replied. Say you'll teach children who need to learn that music and beauty exists even in difficult circumstances. Say you'll show them what real courage looks like. Yes, Lukas whispered, then stronger. Yes, I will. The ballroom erupted, not in mockery this time, but in applause. Some guests were crying, moved by what they'd witnessed. Others looked ashamed, recognizing their own complicity in standing by while cruelty unfolded. The three men left quickly, their power and arrogance deflated. Other guests who had been filming deleted their videos, suddenly ashamed of what they'd intended to share. An elderly woman approached Lukas, her expensive jewelry glinting in the light. Young man, she said gently, I lost my husband last year. I understand about holding on to what remains. Your wife would be very proud. As the evening continued, Lukas found himself no longer invisible. No longer just a waiter. He was seen, acknowledged, valued. But more importantly, he had proven to himself that standing up for what mattered was worth any risk. If you've ever been looked down on for circumstances beyond your control, leave a heart below. Sometimes courage silences the entire world. The transformation began immediately. Within a week, Adrian had established the Anna Hoffman Memorial Music Program, named after Lukas's late wife, with a mission to provide free music education to children from low-income families across Vienna. Lukas found himself thrust into a new role he never could have imagined. Instead of serving food at galas, he was managing a program, interviewing teachers, selecting students, and slowly rebuilding the musical life he'd abandoned years ago. The hardest part wasn't the work. It was accepting that this was real, that it wasn't going to be taken away. Years of survival mode had taught him to expect loss, to prepare for disappointment. Learning to hope again felt dangerous. Emma's transformation was even more dramatic. Her acceptance into the prestigious Vienna Conservatory for Young Musicians came with Adrian's personal scholarship, and Lukas watched his daughter bloom in ways he'd only dreamed possible. Papa, can I really keep going? Emma asked after her first week of classes. What if we can't afford it next month? Lukas knelt to her level, holding her small hands in his. This is yours now, Liebchen. No one can take it from you. Mr. Keller made sure of that. Why did he help us? Emma asked with a child's directness. Because he remembered being where we were, Lukas replied, and because seeing someone fight for what they love reminded him of why success matters. Not to have more, but to help more. Adrian himself began showing up at the music program, initially to check on his investment, but increasingly because something about the place drew him back. He would sit quietly in the back of rehearsals, watching children discover joy in music. Seeing Lukas teach with a patience and passion that made even simple scales sound meaningful. One afternoon, Adrian arrived to find Emma practicing alone, struggling with a difficult passage. Without thinking, he sat beside her. May I? He asked, gesturing to the violin. Emma handed it over shyly, and Adrian positioned the instrument, then played the problematic section with unexpected skill. Emma's eyes went wide. You play, she exclaimed. I did once, Adrian admitted, handing the violin back. A long time ago, before I decided music was impractical and business was the only path to security. But you can do both, Emma said with the simple wisdom of children. Papa says we don't have to choose between practical and beautiful. We can have both if we're brave. Adrian smiled, truly smiled, not the corporate expression he wore like armor. Your papa is a very wise man. From that day, Adrian became more than a distant benefactor. He attended recitals, offered feedback, and slowly allowed himself to reconnect with the part of his life he'd buried under ambition and success. Lukas noticed the change in him. You're different here, he observed one evening after the students had left. Less like the CEO everyone fears and more like a person. This place reminds me of who I was before I became who I am, Adrian replied. Or maybe it shows me who I could still become. Together they worked on expanding the program. Lukas contributed his musical expertise and understanding of what struggling families needed. Adrian provided resources, connections, and gradually, personal involvement that went far beyond writing checks. They planted lilacs outside the music school. Emma's idea because she'd read that lilac flowers meant memory and renewal. The three of them worked in the garden together, Adrian in his expensive suit with dirt under his fingernails, laughing at himself in a way his corporate board would never have recognized. "Why lilacs specifically?" Adrian asked Emma as they patted soil around the roots. "Because they come back every year," Emma explained seriously. "Just like music comes back to people even when they think they've lost it. Like it came back to Papa. Like maybe it could come back to you too." Adrian was quiet for a moment, then cleared his throat roughly. "You're quite perceptive for a 7-year-old. 8 next month," Emma corrected. "And Papa says I get my wisdom from Mama." She always knew what people needed, even when they didn't know themselves. That evening, as they cleaned up the garden tools, Emma asked Adrian a question that had clearly been building. "Mr. Keller, could you be my grandfather? I don't have one, and you seem like you could be good at it." Adrian froze, completely unprepared for the innocent request. Lukas started to intervene, to apologize for his daughter's forwardness, but Adrian held up a hand. He knelt down to Emma's level, and his eyes were suspiciously bright. "If you would like that, Emma, I would be honored. I've never been a grandfather before, but I promise to try my best." Emma threw her arms around his neck, and Adrian held her carefully, as if afraid she might break or disappear. Over her head, his eyes met Lukas's, and something unspoken passed between them. Gratitude, understanding, and the beginning of something that felt remarkably like family. If you believe kindness can save a life, hit like to spread this message further. 6 months after that confrontation in the ballroom, the Anna Hoffman Memorial Music Program had become one of Vienna's most talked about initiatives. It had expanded to 3 locations, served over 200 children, and changed the conversation about what corporate philanthropy could achieve. But the most significant changes weren't in the program's success metrics. They were in the small daily moments that transformed 3 lonely people into something resembling a family. In the main rehearsal room, 3 chairs always sat in a specific arrangement. One for Lukas, one for Emma, and one for Adrian. Students knew those seats were reserved, that the 3 people who'd built this place together would always have a spot waiting. On the wall hung a photograph, Emma playing violin at her first recital, Adrian standing beside her clapping, Lukas behind them with tears of pride streaming down his face. The caption read simply, "Family, built not by blood, but by choice and courage." That spring morning, as sunlight streamed through the music school's windows, the 3 of them sat together reviewing enrollment applications. Emma, now 8, was surprisingly involved in the selection process, insisting that heart mattered more than skill. "This boy," she said, pointing to an application, "he says music is the only time his house is quiet. He needs to be here." Adrian and Lukas exchanged glances. Then Adrian marked the application accepted without hesitation. "You're getting very good at this," Adrian told Emma. "Perhaps someday you'll run this program." "Maybe," Emma replied thoughtfully. "But first I want to be good enough to play Mama's violin at a real concert, to show everyone that she was here, that she mattered, that her music still lives." Lukas felt his throat tighten. "She would be so proud of you, Liebchen." "I know, Papa, because you tell me every day. And now I have you and Opa Adrian to tell me too." Adrian had initially resisted the Opa title, saying he was too young to be anyone's grandfather. But Emma had persisted, and eventually hearing her call him that had become one of his greatest joys. That afternoon, they attended Emma's spring recital. She performed a piece she'd been working on for months, and when the final notes faded, the audience rose in standing ovation. But Emma looked directly at her father and Adrian, her small face asking the question that still mattered most. "Did I do well?" Both men nodded, unable to speak past the emotion in their throats. After the recital, as they walked through the Vienna streets toward home, Emma between them, holding both their hands, Adrian spoke quietly. "You know, Lukas, I spent 20 years building an empire so I would never be vulnerable again. I thought power and money would fill the emptiness. But this, walking with you and Emma, being part of something that matters, this is what I was actually searching for." Lukas squeezed his friend's shoulder. "You gave us a future. You turned my daughter's tears into music. How could I ever repay that? You don't need to repay anything, Adrian replied. You gave me something more valuable than any business deal. You showed me that the boy I used to be, the one who loved music and believed in beauty, he didn't have to be buried forever under the man I became. You gave me permission to be human again. Emma looked up at both of them. Are we a family now? A real one? Yes, Liebchen, Lukas said, his voice thick with emotion. We're a family. The best kind, Adrian added, ruffling her hair. Built not by accident of birth, but by choosing to stand together when the world expected us to stand apart. They continued down the Vienna street. Three people who had found each other in a moment of crisis and decided to stay together in all the moments that followed. The violin was safe, the music continued, and somewhere in the evening air, perhaps Anna Hoffman smiled, knowing her daughter was loved, her memory was honored, and her husband had found family again. Family isn't only about blood. Family is where people stand up to defend you, even when the whole world is watching and mocking. If you believe every courageous heart deserves a home, hit subscribe. The next story might move you to tears. Subscribe for more powerful stories of courage, justice, and finding family. Hit that bell.